Hi, and welcome to Cleaning Processes with Jerry. My podcast is building an online community of like minded individuals and businesses in the chemical and cleaning industry. We're going to share some ideas, tips, solutions, and even tell a couple stories as we expand our markets. Please join me when I frequently introduce a special guest that just might be you. Check out my blog at Hospitality Cleaning 101 for additional information, and you might learn that I work for ChemStation of Boston as a senior sales consultant. If you ever have questions, feel free to reach out and I will answer on a future podcast if you like. Today, we have Marcus Washington from Oklahoma. He actually works for Diversey, and I've already spoken to him. I met up with him probably a year ago on LinkedIn and really love the content he shares. Welcome, Marcus Washington. So, welcome everybody. Today we have Marcus Washington out of, I believe, Oklahoma. Am I correct, Marcus?
Yep, that's correct.
Well, Marcus, thanks for joining me today, and I'm really excited to have you here. I've been following you on LinkedIn for a while, message back and forth, and you've been kind enough to join me here today. Tell us a little bit about your journey in the industry of food sanitation, food safety, and so. Just go ahead and give us the outline.
Yeah,
As long as you like.
I started with Hygiena a few years back. I worked I was the territory sales manager for their diagnostics. So the way they used to have it then, I think it's changed now, but basically they have an environmental monitoring component of the business, which was like their swabs and stuff that they sold, but they also have their diagnostics part. So, prior to joining Hygiena, it was getting my bachelor's in food science. Got my bachelor's in about 2020. And then I was going to get my master. While I was looking for my master's, I applied for the job at Hygiena. They let me finish out my master's project, and then I was working for them full time while still doing my master's online. It was weird. It was, during COVID. So they were allowing stuff to be online that normally wasn't. And worked for them for a while, but my master's was kind of a focus on food microbiology. So worked at Hygiena, but then transitioned over to SGS, where I worked as again like a territory business manager for the lab that is in Oklahoma City. And then after that, kind of just started doing some food safety consulting. Worked as in QA for pet food companies. So really just focused on a lot on the microbiology side, and then now working for Diversey for the past 5 months in chemical sales, and then using my micro background to kind of help serve the clients in terms of uh, what their needs are. Do they need help cleaning? Sometimes they'll ask me, how would you clean this? What would you recommend for this? Things like that. So been able to use my QA and microbiology background to really help clients there also while selling chemicals. So that's really been my journey so far. It's been a lot of different stuff. Last year, I mostly do a lot of consulting, did a lot of contract work for different companies. And then this year now working with Diversey for the past 5 months, really since the beginning of the year in January.
Well, a couple things right off the bat. I would say you're probably, am I correct? You're fortunate that you were able to continue education through that whole process, and still, I assume you were working at the same time as well, because during COVID, let's be honest, a lot of people lost their jobs. I mean, people, right? It, it was crazy times.
Yeah. It was difficult for me because as a student, we had never seen anything like this. Because I think it was the end of my bachelor's, probably the last semester as a bachelor student. Everything completely went online. So this was hard for me as a food science student because obviously we had labs and stuff like that. So the way the university ended up doing it was like only a certain amount of people could be in a lab at a set time. Uh, Only everybody had to wear masks and stuff like that, and of course social distancing. And so, yeah, being able to get a job during that time was kind of hard because I was when I started applying for jobs, I was in grad school, but they don't really tell you when because if you apply too early, some companies aren't willing to wait that long. But then you don't want to wait until you graduate to apply either. So it was, very fortunate to get a job during that time. And then also with it being COVID, it kind of benefited me because I was able to still have my master, do that online because, we kind of had made things more accessible. Whereas like traditionally doing a food science master's online would just be impossible because of all the lab work and stuff you have to do. So it was very interesting at that time. It was more one of the most interesting things I had ever experienced.
Now, in working with the diversity, and I'm not asking you any share any company secrets, but how large is your geographic region?
So for me, I just cover Oklahoma and Arkansas. So I'm located in Choctaw, which is probably about 20 or 30 minutes east of Oklahoma City, depending on the part of the city. So really, I'm able to cover um, all of Oklahoma because I'm like right in the center of Oklahoma, but then cover parts of Arkansas as well. And that's been pretty. It's been different for me because working at SGS and Hygiena, um, most of the focus is on like net new sales. But obviously, in the chemical industry, there's a lot of big focus on service, and I think that one of the differentiators is the amount of service that you can provide.
Correct, because with no matter what chemicals you're selling, doesn't matter from a car wash to food to maybe hospitality, restaurants or laundry, stuff like that, is much more than just the chemicals. It has to bring you the service that encompasses it because chemicals, let's be honest, every company has their little patents on certain products, stuff like that, but it comes down to the application in the training and stuff like that. So since I brought up training, I'm sure that's a big part of your job as well. Training your customers, am I correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you're really spot on with that. Is that the biggest thing is like we all have our patents and things, but there's a lot of chemicals like quats or different chlorinated cleaners that can be very similar. Biggest thing, like you said, is going to be training the customer on how to use the product effectively, uh, and then coming with a different mindset than them just try and solve problems. Because a lot of my clients follow very similar cleaning processes, but obviously they have different challenges that come up every day, every month, every week, so often. And so really what they expect me to do as a rep is how can we use this chemical most effectively? So sometimes I may suggest like removing pieces of equipment, taking things apart, things like that, that they may not have thought of before. That way the chemical can actually reach the places it needs to go. And then also stuff like biofilms. You have to figure out how to show them how to break those things down, use a chemical that will get into the biofilms and then clean, sanitize, different things like that. So really being an extension of their quality assurance team, their sanitation team, sometimes being an extension of their maintenance team. Whenever our equipment goes down, we go in and help fix that as far as their chemical dispensing goes. So really just being an extension of the plant itself was where our value truly is, because obviously we have the products that differentiate us, but we really have to lean into the service aspect pretty heavily as well.
Now, a lot of people might not know this, however, I do. You probably have to work many nights as well, don't you?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Last week I had 2 overnights back to back. So for a lot of people probably don't know, and obviously you already know this, but most sanitation cycles are third shift. So I have a few companies that I see that I will observe their sanitation for them, provide recommendations, feedback. But those will typically happen overnight. So some of my clients in West Oklahoma, they do sanitation overnight. So I'll go there every 2 weeks, make sure everything's going good. Then I have another client that's in Northeast Oklahoma, same thing every 2 weeks, observe sanitation, help them troubleshoot issues. They have third-party sanitation, so I'm kind of like an extra layer in addition because they have their internal sanitation manager who watches over then the third-party sanitation and myself. So we kind of have that layer of all working together, seeing how we can again apply the chemical correctly. And yet, then I'd say maybe 5 or 6 nights a month, maybe overnight. Um, Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. Just depends. Sometimes there'll be emergencies and stuff like that. So it really just depends.
Right. So the what since you're fairly new with Diversey, but you have a lot of the education. Can, what is the one thing that probably has surprised you the most about your job in selling chemicals? What is it that you never, let's be honest, it doesn't matter if you're selling chemicals or if you're selling cars or anything. There's things that you don't learn in that interview process where he got work, you go, I didn't know this part. Some of it's positive too. So I'm just not looking for the negative. Anything big that has stood out and uh, not trying to be negative or a customer or even the company you work for, but something made you go, wow, I never knew. Because I
Yeah,
have a
something I
hundred of them.
did. Something I really didn't think about before was with service. You're at the customer, uh, pretty frequently, and so when I would sell diagnostics or lab equipment, like we typically touch base with the customer like once a quarter because when I was at Hygiena, the way it worked is you have your account manager or your territory sales manager who manages the sales, but we also had a technical support specialist who would do all of like the service that like I would do now as an account manager. So if there's something wrong with their equipment, they'll go down there, they'll troubleshoot it, they'll fix the equipment, they know all the technical stuff. The thing that surprised me was once I came here was, well, I have to do both of those roles now. So I'm the person who will, yeah,
Wearing a lot.
yep,
Yep, exactly.
exactly.
One day
So
you're
I'm
the
the person
electrician,
who,
one day you're the plumber, one day you're.
oh
Oh yeah.
yeah, well yeah, because so one day it will be like routine, normal, and then there's another day there's an emergency. So they call me, I go to the plant, I have to troubleshoot and fix. And really, that's been the biggest difference for me is not the fact that I'm having the third alert, but the frequency and being in the plans. And it's really good though from a relationship building standpoint because, let's be honest, a lot of people don't like salespeople. So whenever you're there in the plant with them, you really get to build a better relationship with them long term, and it helps you keep the business going. But I think that's been something that I was not really truly anticipating was, wearing multiple hats. But it's not like terrible or anything like that. Sometimes you can get overwhelmed, but I think it's been pretty good so far.
I got called out for every holiday. Go, I think it was once on an Easter, and I had small children at home. This was many years ago, and I was there, and quite honestly, it was a plumbing problem. Totally, they needed a plumber, and somebody came up to me and said, "Why did they call you? Why did my upper management call you?" And I said, "Well, I said I come out because you call." I go, "Do you realize how hard and how much it would cost to get a plumber today?" And or sure, oh, I understand. I was a path of least resistance. Let's call him, and I don't remember. All I remember is I patched it up so they get a plumber the next day. But no, you have to wear many hats. Like one day you're an electrician, one day you're a plumber, one day you're a school teacher. You're doing the education and stuff like that. So going back, since I brought up the training again, are you finding more emphasis lately on chemical safety as well as the use of the products? It seems like uh, it goes in spurts where chemical safety is very important today.
Yeah, the biggest one for me has been chemical safety. Also proper usage. So with using the machines that we have, you'll have a list of the formulas and then you can click whichever one. Just making sure that people are following the proper dilutions because you don't want to put something that's not food safe at that concentration onto a food safe service. And then also when it comes to usage, people could be overusing if they're not using the correct dilutions. And then all that also goes back to safety, making sure when people are dispensing chemicals that they're wearing the proper PPE, they're not doing X, Y, and Z, they're paying attention. I actually had, it was my second month at Diversey, a client almost spilled acid on me because we're doing the passivation and it was like 6 or 7 in the morning. Well, he worked in sanitation, obviously. So he had been working since the night before and he was dispensing it. And then the hose, he wasn't paying attention because he was tired and the hose like flew out of the tote from the machine and we had to clean it up. Luckily, there was no actual spill or anything but it just goes to show you, even when you think there's not a risk, there could be a risk of something happening and it could just often be, it doesn't have to be something super big. So I think safety has been the biggest one. I actually recently had 2 clients request safety trainings that I did last month. So interestingly enough, yeah, I think that's been the biggest one.
Yeah, safety is big for the customer and safety. And I'm sure of no secret, all companies want us to be safer as well. You know,
Absolutely.
I got a new pair of goggles. I used to wear cheap glasses. Then I had to wear glasses, and then I used that. Oh, I got glasses on. Nah, I actually saw it was. I'll give him credit. It was an Ecolab. A guy on Ecolab had a picture, and he had bought a ski mask, and I said, look, he had it over glasses. I said, might not look fashionable. Well, I was sending him thing through LinkedIn. Hey, great idea. I'm sure a picture of mine. I don't look the most fashionable. I'm not going to win a prize, but it. You only have one set of eyes. You got to be careful, or for ourselves as well.
Absolutely.
So I know you're involved in a couple other things. Tell me a little bit about yourself, and uh, am I correct? You also do some other work for another company as well.
Yeah. So I do basically, I've had food safety consulting for the past year or two, or actually probably the past 3 years now. So I started back when I was at SGS and she kind of was putting my technical knowledge to use because one of the things about Hygiena was we sold to labs. And so when selling to labs, I got to use a little bit more of my technical knowledge. SGS was a little bit different because, excuse me, we were selling testing services and not so much using the technical knowledge as much because there wasn't as big of a focus on what type of equipment being used. It was mainly what pathogen can you test for, how deep is it? It's just a different type of sales process. So I wanted to start consulting to still be able to use my food safety, quality assurance knowledge. Um, and then during that, so last year, my wife and I, we bought a house and then we started with farm animals. So we have, let's say, pigs, goats, chickens, ducks, donkeys, and then we have like livestock guardian dogs. So we used to have about 10 goats, but we recently cut that in half, or a little bit less than, or a little bit more than half. We got down to, I'd say, 4 now. So we had 10 when we were really good, and they would eat all the grass and eat all the brush and the weeds. But the problem is they would love to escape. So we had to get rid of all the troublemakers basically because the troublemakers were the ones who, goats are like herd animals. So one gets out and then the other one's going to get out. So we had one girl who she was like really skinny and able to get through. Well, she had a child who was able to get through pretty much any type of fence because he was so small. Well, then everybody else would try to follow him. And, we like, okay, we can't be too much. So we kept the ones that don't escape as much, and it's been a lot better so far.
Right. Well, as I slowly wrap this up, but I do this recently is at the end, I want you to know I put your information, your LinkedIn, your different contact information where people can contact you and stuff like that. But Tell me the one question that you wished I would have asked you that I haven't yet. You have as long the answer as you want. There's probably something you were begging me to ask.
That's actually a good question. I think the biggest thing that I'd like to share about myself is that, I've been through multiple parts of the industry. So been able to be on the sales side, but then also worked in QA as in the production facility. Also was able to work on the farm and do that from that perspective. So really that's allowed me to have a whole um holistic approach. And then when I see things now as a rep, I understand how that like the ideal way to clean and the amount of labor it takes is gonna be hard or may not work for somebody's production schedule. Like when we're talking about breaking down pieces of equipment, maybe it's ideal to break down something once a week or 2 or 3 times a week. But how do we do that and still have time to start a production at 5 a.m., right? So those are the things that I'm able to learn from working in all the parts of the industry rather than, and I think a lot of chemical reps have that experience where they have either plant experience or something. I think that just sales in general, you kind of have to prove yourself as knowing because this is just a salesperson,
It's
you know?
it's called surrounding the customer. You've walked their walk. You've
Absolutely.
been there at night on yourself. Before you sold chemicals, you've had to work nights before. It's not your first time. It's not your first rodeo. This podcast isn't about me, but I had to adapt different times through careers and selling because originally at age 15, I was a dishwasher. The next thing you know, I wanted to be a chef and worked in restaurants, restaurant management. Next thing you know, I was selling the restaurant and I was selling the chemicals with the dish machine. Well, I could walk into any dish machine area. I'd walk into any manager and I can walk the walk. I can talk the talk, wherever. I've been there. I know what it is. So it really matters. Now, I'm more toward food and food production like yourself, but I've been there because it doesn't matter. You can tell a person who hasn't because they don't have the feel for it, stuff like that. So, Marcus, I really appreciate the time you've given me. Everybody that I've had on the show becomes a friend, and it's been great talking to you. If I can ever help you, reach out to me, and we'll stay in touch. All right.
Absolutely. Yes. And likewise, you as well. If you ever need anything from me,
All right. Have a great day.
all right, you should.
Thank
Right, you're right.